The Criasi execution arena was built to intimidate, but today it stood strangely quiet, its metallic stands humming with the low breath of thousands watching. At the center, Commander Thexer marched forward with a small human child gripped tightly by the wrist. Dust clung to her tangled brown hair and streaked across her face, but she didn't shed a tear. She didn't scream. She didn't even flinch. That alone disturbed the Criasi delegates more than they wanted to admit. Her name was Lisa Marin, a human barely 8 cycles old. To the Criasi, she appeared tiny, fragile, even no bigger than the average Criasi hatchling. A few murmurs rose among the alien leaders, their slit-like mouths twisting in confusion. "Behold," proclaimed Dexler, high speaker judgment, his 4 glassy eyes shimmering with cruel satisfaction. "The remarkable species of humans claim deserves galactic protection." He motioned dismissively to the child. "I see nothing but soft, weak flesh." The Criasi Empire had spent centuries proving superiority through brutal trials. Any species allowed into their controlled territories had earned respect through survival. None of the weaker civilizations ever passed. Most died screaming in the pits. And today, humanity was on trial. 3 cycles earlier, human diplomats had refused to surrender mining rights to the Criasi. Thexer, always eager for violence, had taken matters into his own hands. He'd attacked a human colony convoy and stolen the smallest, least threatening specimen aboard, Lisa, and now she stood in the spotlight of the execution pit. Her final moments assumed inevitable. Towering behind her was a real spectacle, a monstrous albino predator bred specifically by the Criasi for executions. The beast was known as Frostclaw, though the off-worlders simply called it Snowfong. It was a living nightmare. 12 feet tall at the shoulder, muscles rippling like coiled cables beneath pale fur. Its fangs gleamed with wet hunger. For 3 centuries, not a single being had survived contact with it. Not one. Thexer activated the arena's amplifiers. His voice boomed across the stands. "This is humanity's champion. Let this test reveal the truth. Does their species deserve to stand among the strong?" Lisa didn't look at him. She didn't even glance at the walls rising around her. She looked up at the gigantic wolf. And then, calmly, almost politely, she said, "My dad is going to be very, very mad at you." A ripple of laughter spread across the Criasi spectators. Thexer's mandibles clicked as he leaned closer. "Your father, Nick Marin, is gone, destroyed in the void while chasing us." Lisa blinked once. "Nope," she said simply. The commander's eyes narrowed. Insolence from prey was unacceptable. He slammed his palm against the control panel. The energy barriers flared. Snowfong's restraint snapped open with echoing bangs. The wolf lunged instantly, a blur of white fury, a streak of claws and fangs. The Criasi leaned forward eagerly, anticipating the spray of red and the crunch of bones. But Lisa didn't run. She didn't cower. Instead, she planted her feet, raised one hand like a parent scolding a stubborn puppy, and shouted, "Sit!" The single word cracked to the arena like a whip. Snowfong froze midair, paws skidding violently as it landed awkwardly mere inches from her. Confusion rippled across its glowing red eyes, as if it had never in its life been spoken to like that. The arena erupted in gasps. Lisa tilted her head and said, with a kindness one might use on a lonely neighborhood dog, "Good boy." The giant wolf blinked. Lisa stretched out her hand. Paw. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then, to the shock of every single soul in the arena, Snowfong, the triumphant slayer of hundreds, lifted one massive, clawed paw and delicately placed it into the tiny human girl's hand. Lisa smiled warmly. "See? You're not scary. You're just lonely." The Criasi delegation recoiled as if witnessing a ghost. Thexer's throat membranes ballooned with fury. This wasn't how things were supposed to go. The beast was obeying her, defying them. "Kill her!" he roared, jamming his claw onto the paint control device. Snowfong collapsed with a tortured scream, thrashing as electricity ripped through its body. Lisa's eyes widened, and then hardened into something fierce and protective. "Stop hurting him!" she screamed, sprinting toward the barrier between her and Thexer. And for the first time, the Creassi saw something far more terrifying than Snowfong. They saw the rage of a human child. The barrier separating Lisa and Commander Thexer shimmered like liquid light as she slammed her tiny fist against it. The energy shield rippled with every strike, humming with power far beyond what an 8-year-old's hands could scratch. But she didn't stop. Tears streamed down her dusty face, streaking lines through dirt and grit. Behind her, Snowfong writhed in agony, claws digging trenches into the arena floor as the pain collar burned electricity into his flesh. Every pulse forced a choking howl from the massive beast, a sound that echoed so loudly the arena walls vibrated. Lisa's voice cracked, but it didn't falter. "Stop it. Leave him alone." Her words echoed through the silenced arena, slicing through the tension like a shockwave. The Creassi spectators shifted uncomfortably. They were accustomed to fear, to begging, to desperate scrambling for life. But this was new. This was a child furious not for herself, but for a creature that could swallow her whole. Thexer froze for half a breath, unsettled by the raw intensity in the little human's eyes. Then he sneered. "You're defending a weapon that was bred to destroy you," he hissed. "You feel pity for that?" "He's not a weapon," Lisa shot back. "You made him one." Her voice broke with fury. "You hurt him his whole life. He didn't choose any of this." The spectators murmured louder now. Creassi officers exchanged nervous glances. No creature had ever dared to accuse them, let alone a human child who should have been trembling in terror. For the first time, a faint pressure formed in the center of Thexer's chest. Unease. It made his skin itch under his armor. He hit the pain button again. Electricity tore through Snowfong's body. Lisa screamed as if the shock hit her instead. That was when it happened. A new sound rolled through the arena. A deep metallic groan. Then a thunderous crack. The ceiling above them trembled. No, bulged, as though something enormous was pushing from above. Dust rained down. The lights flickered. A deafening vibration rattled every seat in the gallery. "Structural breach!" a Creassi guard shouted. "Something's forcing entry." Before Thexer could bark an order, the entire ceiling ripped open. Metal peeled back like tin foil. A monstrous shadow filled the new void, angular, colossal, unmistakably human in design. A battle cruiser. A warship large enough to eclipse the arena entirely. But that wasn't the impossible part. The impossible part was a name illuminated in blazing blue letters on its hull. HMS Determination. Gasps rose from every corner of the arena. That ship wasn't destroyed? It can't be here. It was vaporized. How is this possible? The warship hovered over the ruined ceiling, like an executioner's blade. Its forward cannons glowed white-hot, ready to fire with a single command. Then a voice, one that every human officer in the region would recognize, roared through every speaker, every comm system, every device in the building. A voice vibrating with barely controlled rage. "Step away from my daughter." Thexer's blood ran cold. It was him, Nick Marin, the father they claimed was dead. Lisa's face lit up instantly. "I told you," she said triumphantly, though no one could hear her over the chaos. "My dad gets mad when people lie." Thexer scrambled backward, mandibles chattering in panic. "Activate the defense grid. Raise the anti-ship shields. Now!" But they never got the chance. 3 beams of light streaked from the Determination. The first beam struck the handheld control device in Thexer's claws, vaporizing it completely. The second beam fried every weapon in the arena. Guns, energy blades, shock prods, rendering them into smoking heaps. The third beam shattered the pit barrier around Lisa, dissolving the crackling wall in front of her like sand in the wind. All without touching her. Human precision strikes were the stuff of legends. But this was artistry. Lisa stumbled forward as the barrier vanished, immediately spinning and sprinting back to Snowfong. The wolf lay trembling, steam rising from singed fur. His breathing was ragged, uneven. His glowing red eyes flickered weakly. Lisa slid to her knees and wrapped both arms around his massive neck, ignoring the heat of burned flesh. "It's okay," she whispered, stroking the fur helplessly. "It's over. I'm here. You don't have to be scared anymore. Snow Fong's sides heaved. His pupils widened, softening into something unfamiliar, something gentle. For the first time in its engineered life, the monster leaned into the touch of another being. The arena, moments ago a place of death, now felt like a sanctuary. A soft hum filled the air. Thexer turned and froze. A human transport beam materialized in a column of blue-white light. When it faded, Nick Marin stood there, battered armor, rifle in hand, flanked by Marines in full strike gear. His eyes ignored the Criasi entirely. They went straight to his daughter. Lisa looked up, still hugging the wolf. "Daddy," she said, voice trembling with both relief and exhaustion. "They were mean to him. Can we keep him? Please." Nick blinked once, assessed the situation. Child unharmed. Beast not attacking. Hostiles disabled. And then he said the most human sentence possible under the circumstances. "Yeah, sweetheart, we're bringing him home." Lisa still knelt beside Snow Fong, her small hands buried in the thick fur of a creature that could have ended her life in a heartbeat. Nick Marin stood several paces away, rifle lower but posture rigid, like a storm held in human shape. Around him, 12 human Marines fanned out, weapons raised, visors glowing with tactical data. Their boots crunched on the arena floor, breaking the heavy silence. Commander Thexer trembled where he stood. His four eyes darted between Nick, the Marines, the looming battlecruiser overhead, and the small child who had undone centuries of Criasi dominance without firing a single shot. Nick finally exhaled, slow, controlled. His gaze softened as it rested fully on Lisa. Without another word, he strode across the arena. Lisa smiled up at him, cheeks tear-streaked and smudged with dirt. "Daddy!" He didn't want to hurt me. He was scared. Snow Fong gave a low, trembling rumble, leaning gently into her as if trying to hide behind her. Nick kneeled beside them, his armored suit clinking softly. He scanned the char-puncture marks on Snow Fong's neck, where the pain collar had burned into flesh. His eyes hardened again. "Yeah," he muttered, brushing Snow White fur away from one of the wounds. "I can see that." Then he stood, turning his full attention toward Thexer. That was when the temperature in the arena seemed to drop. The commander felt a primal instinct bubble in his gut, a sensation he hadn't felt since he was a juvenile. Fear. True, bone-rattling animal fear. Nick's voice came out low, the kind of quiet that was far more dangerous than shouting. "You tortured my daughter's friend." Thexer sputtered, trying to salvage authority. "That creature belongs to the Criasi Empire. It is engineered property. Nothing more." Nick took a step forward. Thexer took a step back. "Snow Fong," Nick said coldly, "is a sentient being, and you strap an illegal neural agony ring around his throat. You have no proof." Thexer barked. Nick tapped the side of his helmet. "My ship's been recording from orbit since you stole my daughter. Every second, every scream, every time you use that device on him." Thexer's throat membranes deflated. He knew what that meant. He knew exactly what was coming. Galactic law was unambiguous. Cruelty to a developing sentient creature was an enforceable war crime, and humans were infamous for pursuing justice with relentless, devastating precision. Nick raised his wrist comm. Marin to Admiral Stone. Send the full recording to the Galactic Council. Begin legal enforcement protocols. A moment passed. Then a voice crackled back, steady and authoritative. Transmission confirmed. Council ships are already inbound. High above, space shimmered as multiple jump gates opened, deploying massive vessels with the insignia of the Galactic Council. Neutral arbiters feared even by empires. Thexer felt his legs buckle. No, this is a misunderstanding. A cultural confusion. Humans are overreacting." Nick cut him off with a dismissive look. "You abducted a child," he said flatly, "and you try to execute her to make a political statement." Thexer's voice shrank. Don't talk." Nick's tone was final. Behind him, human Marines moved into position, training weapons on the Criasi officers who still hadn't decided whether to run or surrender. Lisa tugged at Nick's sleeve. "Daddy, can we take his collars off first?" He hates them. They hurt. Nick's hardened expression melted instantly. Of course, sweetheart. The Marines exchanged glances. Seeing a monstrous war beast defanged by an 8-year-old was one thing. Watching that same girl give orders about veterinary care was another. Nick knelt beside Snow Fong again and carefully examined the embedded collars. His touch was gentle, measured. Snow Fong watched him with amber eyes that had fully abandoned their earlier red glow. "It's okay, big guy," Nick murmured. "We're going to get these off." Snow Fong lowered his head, pressing his enormous snout into ground in trust. Nick's gauntlet activated with a crackling blue arc. With a quick slice, he severed the first pain collar. The remaining rings clattered to the floor as he removed the clamps one by one. Lisa stroked the newly freed fur. Snow Fong nudged her softly with his muzzle, an enormous, careful gesture that made several Marines flinch. "He says thank you," Lisa said confidently. Nick blinked. "Does he now?" Snow Fong rumbled approvingly. "Okay," Nick conceded. "Fair enough." Thexer watched the scene unfold in horror. A child taming a death beast. A human ship tearing open his arena. The Galactic Council arriving to indict his empire. Human Marines treating him like a criminal. And worst of all, the humans had claimed Snow Fong. All of Creasy tradition. All their dominance, their pride, their reputation, fell apart in a single afternoon because of an 8-year-old and her father. Nick stood, lifted his rifle, and pointed it directly at Thexer. "You tried to kill my daughter," he said calmly. "So here's what happens now." The Marine stepped closer. Energy cuffs clicked open. Thexer dropped to his knees. Nick didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He simply stated the truth. "You're under arrest." The arena erupted into shouts as Marines swarmed the Creasy delegation. Snow Fong pressed closer to Lisa, protective now instead of predatory. Lisa wrapped her arms around his massive head. "It's okay," she whispered. "Dad will fix everything." And for the first time in its existence, the beast believed her. Snow Fong lay curled around Lisa like a living mountain of fur and muscle, his massive head resting gently, almost reverently, in her lap. The monstrous execution beast, feared for centuries, now looked more like an oversized, exhausted guardian. His breathing, ragged moments ago, had steadied under Lisa's soft strokes. Nick kept one protective eye on them, while coordinating the unfolding chaos around him. Human Marines had fanned across the arena with swift, methodical precision. They weren't here to slaughter. They were here to secure, neutralize, and preserve evidence. Every Creasy officer who reached for a weapon found a stun round or containment field waiting. Every attempt at resistance evaporated under the calm efficiency of trained human soldiers. Thexer, now bound in glowing restraints that wrapped around all four of his limbs, hissed threats that held no weight anymore. "You cannot imprison me. I am a commander of the Creasy Empire. My people will retaliate." Nick didn't even bother looking at him. "Your people," he replied dryly, "are currently being politely disarmed by Galactic Council officers outside." And indeed, through the shattered ceiling, dozens of Council vessels hovered like judgmental gods, sleek, silver, emblazoned with a symbol of impartial authority. Their presence made even the Marines straighten subconsciously. Lisa, meanwhile, was far more focused on her new friend and the politics unraveling around her. "Daddy?" she asked softly, scratching the thick fur behind Snow Fong's ear. "Yeah, Pumpkin?" Nick answered without turning, still issuing orders through his comm. "Can we give him snacks? He's had a really bad day." The Marines closest to them coughed. Some hiding grins, others looking away to maintain professional composure. A creature that had torn dozens of warriors apart now sat meekly while an 8-year-old discussed snack time. Nick finally paused, glancing over. "Let's get him stabilized medically first, all right?" Lisa nodded firmly, as if accepting a command from a superior officer. Snow Fong made a low, appreciative rumble. A Council peace officer in shimmering silver armor approached Nick. The officer's insectoid eyes blinked in staggered pairs. "Captain Marin, we have received full evidence files. Your accusations against the Creasy Empire are valid. Torture of sentient entities, kidnapping of a protected minor, illegal execution protocols. There will be formal hearings. Good, Nick replied. No anger, no triumph, just controlled focus. I'll give my testimony once my daughter is safe. The officer tilted its head. Understandable. Thexer thrashed against his restraints. The beast belongs to us. You have no claim over Snowfong. Nick finally turned to him, pausing mid-step. You call him a beast. My daughter calls him a friend. Lisa nodded solemnly. He's a good boy. You don't get to keep him. Snowfong puffed his chest slightly, as if proud of his new title. Furthermore, Nick continued, galactic law is very clear. Once a sentient creature forms a protective bond with a member of another species, it becomes their responsibility, the council officer finished, and thus under human guardianship. Thexer sputtered. Absurd! It's the law, the officer replied simply. Nick returned his attention to Lisa as technicians approached with medical gear. Pumpkin, they're going to check his vitals. Make sure he's okay to move. Lisa stroked Snowfong's fur once more. It's all right, she whispered. They're helpers. Snowfong studied the approaching medics with wary eyes. But when Lisa placed her hand gently on his snout and whispered, Trust me, the giant wolf exhaled deeply and lowered his head, granting them access. The medics didn't dare speak at first. Their instruments, normally used for armored infantry or heavy war beasts, trembled slightly in their hands. A creature bred for slaughter, submitting because an 8-year-old said please. Humans were terrifying in all the wrong ways. They realized. One medic finally cleared her throat. Sir, his muscle mass is, good grief, far beyond anything we treated before. But aside from electrical trauma, he's stable. Nick nodded. Get him pain suppressants and a carrier harness for transport. Sir, the medic added, voice hesitant, he appears to recognize your daughter as a primary bond. Nick blinked. Lisa beamed. Snowfong wagged his massive tail, sending a gust of wind that nearly knocked the Marine off balance. Yeah, Nick muttered, I'm starting to notice. A tremor shook the arena floor. The Determination repositioned above them, lowering support cables and cargo platforms through the torn roof. Captain Marin, the council officer said, you're authorized to escort your child and her companion to your ship. Additional security will take over containment here. Nick exhaled slowly in relief. Thank you. Snowfong rose slowly, towering over everyone yet leaning protectively into Lisa. She placed one hand on his fur, guiding him forward. As they began the ascent toward the suspended platform, Lisa looked back at Thexer, still bound, still shouting empty threats. Hurting people doesn't make you strong, she called out. Her voice carried across the arena. It just makes you lonely. Thexer froze mid-scream. Nick placed a hand on Lisa's shoulder. Let's go home. Snowfong nudged her gently, and together they stepped into the transport harness as the Determination lifted them toward safety. The cargo platform ascended steadily toward the gaping entrance carved into the hull of the HMS Determination. Sparks drifted like glowing snowflakes from the torn arena's ceiling as workers and drones navigated the debris. The ship's landing lights bathed everything in clean white radiance. Pure, surgical, unmistakably human. Lisa stood at the center of the platform, one hand wound in Snowfong's thick fur. The great beast pressed close to her, muscles coiled with instinctive caution. Even now, even safe, he kept himself between her and the unknown. The Marines surrounding them maintained a respectful distance, though they stole glances, some awestruck, some nervous, at the towering wolf. Nobody tell command we needed a bigger elevator, one Marine muttered. Another whispered, I feel like if he sneezes, we'll get thrown off this platform. Snowfong's ears twitched toward them, and the men immediately straightened, pretending they hadn't spoken. Lisa giggled. He doesn't sneeze on people. He's polite. Nick, standing beside her, gave the wolf a sideways look. Let's not test that assumption, sweetheart. Snowfong snorted softly, something suspiciously close to amusement. As they rose into the ship's belly, the familiar metallic corridors unfolded before them. White panels, soft blue guidance lights, pipework humming with the heartbeat of antimatter reactors. Lisa inhaled deeply. It smells like home. Nick smiled faintly. You've been gone for only a few hours. But it felt like forever. Snow Fong pressed his nose to her shoulder, chuffing. Lisa patted him. You too. You're coming home now. A detail team met them at the platform. Engineers, medics, and logistics officers staring upward with astonished faces. Captain, one stammered. That is, sir, what is that? Lisa put her hands on her hips. Our friend. Snow Fong straightened proudly. Nick rubbed his temples. He's under human protection. Log him as a temporary companion class sentient until the Council finalizes species status. The logistics officer hesitated. Captain, our largest companion habitat is for a 900-pound Terran moose. Snow Fong, easily several tons heavier, blinked. Lisa gasped dramatically. Daddy, he's not a moose. Nick sighed. Build whatever he needs. Reinforce the deck plating. And install something comfortable. If my daughter decides he sleeps on my bunk, I resign. A team of engineers scrambled to write notes. Lisa grinned. He likes soft blankets. Noted. One engineer muttered, already planning structural supports for a creature the size of shuttle. As they walked to the corridor, passing crew members pressed against the walls, stunned into silence. Some saluted hastily. Others forgot to breathe. Snow Fong sniffed the air curiously, his giant head bobbing above the humans like an exploring mountain goat. When he accidentally brushed a ceiling panel loose with his ears, a technician nearly fainted. Lisa soothed him. It's okay. The ship is just tall challenged. Nick coughed to hide a laugh. Pumpkin, it's built for humans. Well, she said reasonably, that's rude to big creatures. The Marines escorting them exchanged grins behind their visors. They reached the medical bay, a spacious chamber with reinforced floors and sprawling equipment. But even here, Snow Fong dwarfed everything. Dr. Alara Voss, the ship's xenobiologist, stared at him with unblinking fascination. What magnificent bone structure, she whispered. Captain, I must... Nick held up a hand. No experiments. No poking. No prodding. The doctor sagged but nodded. Fine. I'll settle for a non-invasive scan. Snow Fong growled softly. Lisa placed a calming hand on his cheek. She's a helper, too. Just don't be too loud, she told the doctor. Dr. Voss swallowed and lowered the scanner's intensity. I'll keep it quiet. Soft holographic waves swept over Snow Fong's body. The beast tolerated it, barely, never breaking eye contact with Lisa. After a long pause, Dr. Voss exhaled. My analysis suggests he is beyond typical predatory classification. His neural patterns, she stared at the data, baffled. They show unusually developed empathy centers, far more than expected. Nick raised an eyebrow. Engineered empathy? No. Suppressed empathy. Dr. Voss corrected quietly. They forced him to be violent. But this creature was meant to bond, to protect. The Creassi weaponized him wrong. Lisa scratched Snow Fong's chin. I knew it. Snow Fong's tail thumped once, so hard it rattled the cabinet. Nick snapped his fingers at the crew. Secure everything that's not bolted down. Actually bolted down. A Marine grabbed a crate, only to stumble as another tail thump shook the floor. Sir, request permission to preemptively secure myself. Granted. Nick replied. Through the far viewport, the glowing forms of Council ships descended toward the Creassi facility below. Arrest teams deployed in discipline waves. Nick watched silently. Dr. Voss joined him. Captain, the Council will want hearings, statements, months of inquiry. I know. And this creature, Snow Fong, will be central to everything. Nick glanced at Lisa, who had now curled into Snow Fong's fur, resting against his massive shoulder like he was the world's softest pillow. He's not evidence, Nick said firmly. He's family. Snow Fong exhaled softly, warm air brushing Lisa's hair. Dr. Voss nodded. The ship hummed around them. For the first time since the abduction, Nick allowed himself to breathe. Lisa murmured sleepily, Daddy, will Snow Fong sleep? Nick looked at the wolf, at the cramped corridor, at the low ceiling snapped by ears. Not in the captain's quarters. Snow Fong tilted his head toward him. Nick held up a hand. Don't even think about it. Lisa giggled into Snowfong's fur. The wolf gave a deep, contented rumble. And aboard the HMS Determination, a new legend began. The HMS Determination cruised in a control hover above the Creasy complex, holding position like a steel guardian. Below, Galactic Council enforcement ships swarmed the facility with the precision of a closing fist. Through angled viewports, blue-white lights flashed as Creasy's soldiers were disarmed, cataloged, and escorted into custody. Inside the human flagship, however, the atmosphere felt strangely warm. Lisa sat cross-legged on the reinforced medbay floor, humming quietly as she braided a small lock of Snowfong's fur into something resembling a friendship ribbon. The giant wolf lay stretched beside her, taking up half the room, his chest rising and falling with deep, slow breaths. For the first time in his life, perhaps the first time in generations of his engineered lineage, he knew peace. Nick stood near the medbay entrance, helmet tucked under his arm as he spoke with Admiral Stone over a private holochannel. "We have full documentation, Captain," the Admiral said, the holographic projection flickering with static. "The Council is treating this as a Category 7 sentient abuse case." Nick stiffened. "That's the highest classification." "It is—" The Admiral's gaze softened. "What they did to that creature, and to your daughter, makes this one of the worst violations on record." Nick's jaw tightened. He kept his voice steady, but hard. "Thexer won't walk away from this." "No," the Admiral agreed. "He won't." Nick glanced over his shoulder. Lisa was trying to tie her newly braided fur ribbon around Snowfong's ear. Snowfong, patient as a mountain, tilted his giant head obligingly. The Admiral followed Nick's gaze and exhaled. "Marin, the Council is already discussing who gets guardianship of that creature." Nick didn't hesitate. "His name is Snowfong, and he stays with us." The Admiral raised an eyebrow. "With you or with her?" Nick glanced at his daughter, who was now explaining to Snowfong the importance of friendship jewelry. "With both of us," Nick replied. The Admiral gave a slow, knowing nod. "Understood." The holo flickered out. Nick turned fully toward Lisa. "Pumpkin, we need to talk." Lisa looked up from her decorative mission, a small piece of braided fur dangling from her fingers. "Is Snowfong okay?" Nick kneeled so he could meet her at eye level. "More than okay. But there's something important happening. The Council, they want to decide what to do with him." Lisa frowned instantly, hugging Snowfong's enormous head. "He stays with us." Snowfong growled, not threateningly, but with unmistakable agreement. Nick smiled despite himself. "I know, and he will. I'll make sure of it." Lisa studied him with the sharp intuition only children possess. "Because he's good." "Because he's good," Nick confirmed softly, "and because you showed him kindness when no one else did." Lisa hugged Snowfong harder, burying her face in his fur. "Grown-ups forget sometimes." Nick blinked. "Forget what?" "That being nice is stronger than being scary." Snowfong nudged her gently, as if affirming her wisdom. Nick sat back on his heels. For a moment, he simply watched them, the small human girl and the enormous genetically crafted predator who had chosen her over every violent instinct in his body. Humanity didn't just survive because it was strong. Humanity survived because it made allies everywhere it went, even among monsters. A soft knock at the medbay entrance broke his thoughts. Dr. Voss stepped inside, tablet in hand. "Captain, we've completed the non-invasive scans." Nick stood. "Report." The xenobiologist swallowed. His entire physiology, bone density, muscle layering, neural network structure, was artificially enhanced. But she hesitated. Nick nodded for her to continue. But the enhancement suppressed parts of his brain linked to empathy, trust, and bonding. The Creasy built a creature designed to feel alone, to need orders, to be controlled. It was forced to exist in a state of constant fear. Snowfong whined, low and soft. Lisa hugged him. "No more fear," she whispered. Dr. Voss' voice gentled. "The strangest thing, Captain, when he met your daughter, those suppressed centers reactivated. Stronger than I expected. Snowfong isn't just bonding with her, he's healing." Nick let out a long, slow breath. So what happens now? Dr. Voss smiled slightly. Now, you're the owner of a creature who could knock over a dropship with a sneeze. Snow Fong snorted. Lisa gasped. He does sneeze. Yesterday he almost... Pumpkin, Nick cut in quickly. No sneeze stories inside the ship. Snow Fong rumbled in amusement. Just then, the ship's comm system pinged. Captain Marin, bridge requesting your presence. Council delegates arriving for formal inquiry. Nick stood, his expression shifting from father to officer. On my way. He turned to Lisa. Will you stay with Snow Fong? Lisa gave him a look that said, obviously. Snow Fong wrapped his tail protectively around her, a gesture so gentle it melted whatever remained of Nick's hard edges. Nick pressed a quick kiss to Lisa's forehead, then stepped toward the doorway. Daddy. Lisa called softly. He paused. Yeah. Lisa smiled. Go make the bad guys say sorry. Nick exhaled, a rare laugh breaking through. I'll do my best. He walked out, boots echoing through the corridor. Behind him, Snow Fong nudged Lisa, settling his massive head onto her lap as she resumed braiding new ribbons into his fur. A child teaching a monster how to be gentle. A wolf learning, for the first time, what it meant to be loved, and a father preparing to make an empire answer for their crimes. The bridge of the HMS Determination buzzed with tension the moment Nick stepped inside. Officers snapped to attention, but their usual crisp discipline was tempered with something else. Anticipation. Fear. Respect. The kind of atmosphere that comes when a single mistake could spark an interstellar crisis. On the main display, the Galactic Council envoy ships glowed like silver daggers in the void. Their symbols, an orb encircled by 3 wings, shimmered with quiet authority. Nick approached the central console. Captain on deck, the helmsman announced. At ease, Nick said firmly, even before the crew could straighten fully. Status report. Council shuttle is docking now, the communications officer replied. They're coming aboard for a direct hearing. Nick nodded. Prep conference room 1. Secure all feeds. And get me a live view of the Creasy detention teams. With a few taps, the screen shifted. Below them, Creasy officers, including Commander Thexer, were being marched in restrained columns toward Council transports. Their mandibles twitched in panic or outrage. Their eyes darted toward the hovering human flagship with a mixture of hatred and dread. For the first time in Creasy history, they were on the receiving end of a trial. Nick almost felt a grim satisfaction. Almost. But then he thought of Lisa, and of Snow Fong's haunted eyes when the pain collars were first removed. No, this wasn't satisfaction. It was justice. A soft chime echoed through the bridge. Council delegation requesting permission to board. Granted, Nick replied. Escort them to conference room 1. As he turned to leave, the helmsman called out, Sir, the crew has your back. Nick paused. His eyes softened. Thank you. Let's make sure we do this right. The council hearing begins. The conference room was sterile by design. White walls, gray metal table, dim lighting. A place meant for serious, often grim affairs. But today, the air felt heavier than usual. 3 council delegates entered, each from a different species. At their center was High Arbiter Selvara, a tall, crystalline being whose body refracted light like living glass. Her voice reverberated through the room like chimes struck underwater. Captain Nicholas Marin, she intoned, your report has been received. We will review evidence and testimony now. Nick didn't sit. He stood behind the table, stand straight and unshakable. Before we begin, he said, my daughter's safety is assured. That is all that matters to me. Everything else is about the creature they tortured and the laws they violated. Selvara bowed her shimmering head. It will be addressed. The screen ignited. Footage played. Lisa dragged into the arena. Snow Fong snarling under shock. The crowd jeering. The pain collars activated. Lisa screamed, Stop hurting him. The ceiling exploding. The determination appearing like an angel of fire. Nick's voice thundering. Step away from my daughter. Snow Fong curled protectively around the tiny human. Footage ended. Silence. Dead, suffocating silence. The Creasy representative present in the room, a diplomat named Kaelrix, shifted nervously. There were cultural misunderstandings. Enough. Selvara's voice hit like a hammer. This is not misunderstanding. This is barbarism. Nick kept his expression neutral, but inside, tension unwound slightly. Another council member, a small avian being, added, "This child formed an empathy bond with the creature. To violate such a bond is to violate galactic ethics at the highest level." Kaelrix hissed, "The beast is ours. Engineered property." Nick stepped forward, voice cold and controlled. "Call him that again. I dare you." Kaelrix shrank back. Selvara pressed a hand of light to the table. "The council rules as follows. Snow Fong is hereby recognized as a protected sentient under emergency humanitarian law. Guardianship is provisionally granted to humanity, specifically under the care of Captain Marin's family unit. The Creasy Empire will face formal sanctions, criminal charges, and loss of territorial privileges." Nick didn't breathe for several seconds. Then he asked quietly, "So he stays with us?" Selvara inclined her radiant head. "Yes." Relief washed through him. Not triumph. Not victory. Relief. Thexer faces verdict. 2 guards dragged Commander Thexer into the room. His restraints flared with every futile attempt to resist. He spat, "You cannot condemn an empire for one decision." Nick stared at him with an expression carved from steel. "You didn't just hurt my daughter," he said softly. "You hurt a creature who didn't understand why you hated him." Thexer clicked angrily. "He was made for blood." "No," Nick replied. "He was made by someone who never understood kindness." Selvara spoke next. "Commander Thexer of the Creasy Empire, you stand charged with kidnapping, torture, unlawful execution attempts, and abuse of a developing sentient. You will be held without bail until full trial." Thexer lunged forward. "Humans will regret this." Nick leaned closer. "Maybe, but not today." Guards dragged Thexer out screaming. The room went quiet again. Selvara turned to Nick. "Go to your daughter. Her presence has changed the fate of more than just one creature." Nick nodded, saluted, and left. The ship finds a new balance. When Nick returned to the med bay, he found Lisa asleep, curled up in a nest of blankets tucked between Snow Fong's front legs. Snow Fong, in turn, lay with his head lowered protectively around her, like an enormous living shield. Nick stood in the doorway, watched them breathe together. Watched Snow Fong's ear twitch each time Lisa murmured in her sleep. A giant killer, re-engineered by an 8-year-old's compassion. Dr. Voss stepped beside him. "Captain?" Nick's voice was soft, almost reverent. "Let them sleep." A long pause. "You know," the doctor said gently, "not many species could turn a weapon into a guardian." Nick smiled. "Humans don't tame monsters." He looked at Lisa, at Snow Fong. "We just show them they don't have to be monsters anymore." The bridge of the HMS Determination buzzed with tension the moment Nick stepped inside. Officers snapped to attention, but their usual crisp discipline was tempered with something else. Anticipation, fear, respect, the kind of atmosphere that comes when a single mistake could spark an interstellar crisis. On the main display, the Galactic Council envoy ships glowed like silver daggers in the void. Their symbols, an orb encircled by 3 wings, shimmered with quiet authority. Nick approached the central console. "Captain on deck," the helmsman announced. "At ease," Nick said firmly, even before the crew could straighten fully. Status report. "Council shuttle is docking now," the communications officer replied. "They're coming aboard for a direct hearing." Nick nodded. "Prep conference room 1. Secure all feeds. And get me a live view of the Creasy detention teams." With a few taps, the screen shifted. Below them, Creasy officers, including Commander Thexer, were being marched in restrained columns toward council transports. Their mandibles twitched in panic or outrage. Their eyes darted toward the hovering human flagship with a mixture of hatred and dread. For the first time in Creasy history, they were on the receiving end of a trial. Nick almost felt a grim satisfaction. Almost. But then he thought of Lisa, and of Snow Fong's haunted eyes when the pain collars were first removed. No, this wasn't satisfaction. It was justice. A soft chime echoed through the bridge. Council delegation requesting permission to board. Granted, Nick replied. Escort them to conference room 1. As he turned to leave, the helmsman called out, Sir, the crew has your back. Nick paused. His eyes softened. Thank you. Let's make sure we do this right. The council hearing begins. The conference room was sterile by design. White walls, gray metal table, dim lighting. A place meant for serious, often grim affairs. But today, the air felt heavier than usual. 3 council delegates entered, each from a different species. At their center was High Arbiter Selvara, a tall, crystalline being whose body refracted light like living glass. Her voice reverberated through the room, like chimes struck underwater. Captain Nicholas Marin, she intoned, your report has been received. We will review evidence and testimony now. Nick didn't sit. He stood behind the table, stand straight and unshakable. Before we begin, he said, my daughter's safety is assured. That is all that matters to me. Everything else is about the creature they tortured and the laws they violated. Selvara bowed her shimmering head. It will be addressed. The screen ignited. Footage played. Lisa dragged into the arena. Snow Fong snarling under shock. The crowd jeering. The pain collars activated. Lisa's scream, stop hurting him. The ceiling exploding. The determination appearing like an angel of fire. Nick's voice thundering. Step away from my daughter. Snow Fong curled protectively around a tiny human. Footage ended. Silence. Dead, suffocating silence. The Creasy representative present in the room, a diplomat named Kaelrix, shifted nervously. There were cultural misunderstandings. Enough. Selvara's voice hit like a hammer. This is not misunderstanding. This is barbarism. Nick kept his expression neutral, but inside, tension unwound slightly. Another council member, a small avian being, added, this child formed an empathy bond with the creature. To violate such a bond is to violate galactic ethics at the highest level. Kaelrix hissed, the beast is ours. Engineered property. Nick stepped forward, voice cold and controlled. Call him that again. I dare you. Kaelrix shrank back. Selvara pressed a hand of light to the table. The council rules as follows. Snow Fong is hereby recognized as a protected sentient under emergency humanitarian law. Guardianship is provisionally granted to humanity, specifically under the care of Captain Marin's family unit. The Creasy Empire will face formal sanctions, criminal charges, and loss of territorial privileges. Nick didn't breathe for several seconds. Then he asked quietly, so he stays with us? Selvara inclined her radiant head. Yes. Relief washed through him. Not triumph. Not victory. Relief. Thexer faces verdict. 2 guards dragged Commander Thexer into the room. His restraints flared with every futile attempt to resist. He spat. You cannot condemn an empire for one decision. Nick stared at him with an expression carved from steel. You didn't just hurt my daughter, he said softly. You hurt a creature who didn't understand why you hated him. Thexer clicked angrily. He was made for blood. No, Nick replied. He was made by someone who never understood kindness. Selvara spoke next. Commander Thexer of the Creasy Empire, you stand charged with kidnapping, torture, unlawful execution attempts, and abuse of a developing sentient. You will be held without bail until full trial. Thexer lunged forward. Humans will regret this. Nick leaned closer. Maybe, but not today. Guards dragged Thexer out screaming. The room went quiet again. Selvara turned to Nick. Go to your daughter. Her presence has changed the fate of more than just one creature. Nick nodded, saluted, and left. The ship finds a new balance. When Nick returned to medbay, he found Lisa asleep, curled up in a nest of blankets tucked between Snow Fong's front legs. Snow Fong, in turn, lay with his head lowered protectively around her, like an enormous living shield. Nick stood in the doorway, watched them breathe together. Watched Snow Fawn's ear twitch each time Lisa murmured in her sleep. A giant killer, re-engineered by an 8-year-old's compassion. Dr. Voss stepped beside him. Captain? Nick's voice was soft, almost reverent. Let them sleep. A long pause. You know, the doctor said gently, not many species could turn a weapon into a guardian. Nick smiled. Humans don't tame monsters. He looked at Lisa, at Snow Fawn. We just show them they don't have to be monsters anymore.